Thief. And she was so wonderful in the way that the story could be told from the different cuts. For an example, the kissing scene in the hotel room with Cary Grant and Grace Kelly, and cutting to the fireworks and cutting back to them and going back in such a way that you didn't need to see them kissing the whole time. In those days, you really could not show sexuality on the screen like you can today. So in the case of the hotel room scene, you knew what was going on, but all you had to see was them kissing and then the shot to the fireworks and then back again. And you got the story just as well as if you had been watching them just going at it the whole time.
After they had filmed it and Hitchcock submitted the film to get approval from the Production Code Administration, by this time Jeffrey Sherlock was in charge. And Jeffrey Sherlock saw the scene and cautioned that we have to cut before Cary Grant leans Grace Kelly into the sofa. And Hitchcock saw it and was not about to change anything, and he told his editor, George Tomasini, not to touch a frame of the picture. What he had them do instead was he had his composer, Lynn Murray, compose something which was a little less suggestive, a cue of music which was a little more comedic, and they got away with it.
The score in To Catch a Thief was so different, I think, from a lot of his other films. It was not the build-up that there normally is in the suspense type of thing. Like if you take the kissing scene with Cary Grant and Grace Kelly, it was a different sound than what we're used to hearing, and it was almost something that caught you a little off guard. But I think in this instance, it worked so well. The composer on To Catch a Thief was Lynn Murray, and he was actually instrumental in introducing my grandfather to Bernard Herrmann, who worked on his subsequent movies. The release of To Catch a Thief came on the heels of the release of Rear Window, which is a huge success. So I think there was a little apprehension that they wanted to have this as big a success as Rear Window, and it did. It was a big box office success for my grandfather, for the studio. It had a royal premiere with Grace Kelly and Cary Grant and my grandfather. There really was a lot of publicity about this.
To Catch a Thief was a tremendous success, both financially and critically, and it solidified Hitchcock's relationship with both the studio and with his screenwriter. This was a crew that he would go on to make a number of pictures with, so he was very happy with his association at Paramount. It was certainly the happiest years of his career in some respects.
I remember my grandfather talking about how the movies were made for the audience. They were not made for the critics. They were not made for the studios. They were made for the people who paid the money to be entertained. That was what it was all about, was pure entertainment.
Tell me, what do you get a thrill out of most?
I'm still looking for that one.
One of the things that I enjoyed about To Catch a Thief was it used all the places that I visited when I was younger, because I came over to this country when I was 10. So I was very, very young, but I still was able to remember all the places in the south of France.
My grandparents, along with my mom, would do a lot of traveling in the summer when my mom was very young, and one of the places that they always enjoyed going was the south of France. I think it was one of those places that they always loved, and that was why it was so strong in the movie.
Oh, lovely day. Have you ever seen any place in the world more beautiful?
I think my grandfather had a deep affection for the French, and the French in turn for him. They truly appreciated his work, even as an auteur director as opposed to just a commercial director. And I think it's something that there was a good admiration for both. I think on To Catch a Thief, there is a lot of the sort of, quote, screwball comedy, and I think that it's there for the simple reason that he had such a wonderful sense of humor and such a dry wit that a lot of himself is brought into this film.
He had a great sense of humor. He liked to bring the humor into the movies as much as he can, especially his type of movie, which is suspense. You have got to give the audience time to relax before you build up to the next suspenseful part in the movie.
Where is he?
Who? John Roby.
Never heard of him.
I don't think people know how really funny he was in real life to us, to his friends. His friends knew it, his family knew it because it was part of his personality. He had a wonderful dry sense of humor. He played many jokes on his friends, especially in the earlier days. He was always doing word games with my sisters and I, and we would have to figure out what a certain phrase meant. There was a completely different person away from the camera, a wonderful person.
Hitchcock liked to tell stories, and there is one story. A little girl and a little boy were sitting on the sidewalk, and the little girl was very shy, and the little boy asked her, "What's your name?" "It's something which sticks on the wall." And the little boy said, "Shit." So she said, "No, ivy." It was his favorite story to make us laugh.
On this particular film, To Catch a Thief, you have my grandfather's real hatred of eggs evident when you have the egg being thrown and you have the woman putting out the cigarette into the fried egg, which my grandfather absolutely hated fried eggs.
My father had a lot of food fetishes, I think one would say. He loved soufflés and things like that, but he did not like cutting an egg open and seeing the yolk run.
He was a gourmet, and food was important to him, and family celebrations were around food. And I remember him telling me at different times, he and my grandmother, how Grace and Rainier would come over for dinner when they were visiting in Los Angeles, and they would sit in the kitchen and have a lovely meal. And I used to think, boy, the four of them are just sitting in the kitchen having dinner. But, you know, the greatest conversations and a lot of problem solving was done sitting around the dinner table.
The first time I saw you was on the beach at Cannes. You swam ashore from a motorboat driven by that little French girl.
You got an opener? Thank you.
You want a leg or a breast?
You make the choice.
There was a lot of scenes and shots that were made that I thought were really ahead of his time and held up still so well today. The double entendre things that were said to each other.
I'll bet you told her all your trees were sequoias.
He's a low, worthless thief. Just what did he steal from you?
What you need is something I have neither the time nor the inclination to give you.
Oh? And just what is that?
2 weeks with a good man at Niagara Falls.
The way that the one scene with Cary Grant where you just see the shot of the necklace, you don't see Grace's face, and then the way of telling the story. He did so many things back such a long time ago that still hold up in movie making today. I remember my grandfather always speaking so fondly of his movies with us. I actually ended up taking a class in college because I was so interested in seeing his early films, and then I would go back to him on the weekends. And that's when I really got into discussing his movies with him, because I would ask him certain things that were said in the class and if they were true or not. Some of the questions he would just roll his eyes, and I would say, well, did you mean this in this scene because this is what we were taught on Tuesday night? He said, no, where do they think of these things? So I learned a lot in the class, but I learned more from him on those Sundays after the class. At midterm time, we had to write a paper on Hitchcock's favorite film. So I went to him. I knew Shadow of a Doubt was his favorite film. So he helped me write the paper, and I handed the paper in, and I got the paper back, and I only got a C on the paper. And at the top of the paper was written, I did not elaborate enough on this paper. So I went to my grandfather, and I said, Grandpa, we got a C on this paper. And he said, well, I'm sorry, that's the best I can do. I think people would be very surprised to know that besides the professional side of my grandfather and the wonderful, extraordinary filmmaker that he was just a wonderful man, a man who treated his family, his wife, his friends with respect, who had a huge heart. He was always there for them, always there for his family, adored his wife and his daughter, his grandchildren. And because of that, he will be remembered not just because of being a wonderful filmmaker, but a wonderful man.
And now I'd like to introduce to you our guest commentator for today, the world-famous designer, Miss Edith Head.
The most famous designer in motion picture history was the legendary Edith Head. For over 4 decades of her 60-year career, Edith brought magic to the silver screen in her unforgettable costumes for Paramount Pictures.
Edith decided that Paramount would be a good place for her to get a job because she saw women working there, but she couldn't draw at all. Howard Greer was the costume designer at Paramount, and he taught her how to draw like he drew. But very quickly, she started being very, very useful all around the wardrobe department. And in 1925, another designer named Travis Banton came out from New York. Eventually, Howard Greer decided to leave because all of the big stars were asking for Banton. And Banton was enormously talented. However, without Greer there, he started handing some of the lesser assignments to Edith to do. Banton didn't get along too well with Clara Bow. Clara Bow was Paramount's biggest star, and the public adored her, but she had very poor taste in clothes. She liked to wear bangle bracelets with all of her costumes. She wanted to put belts on dresses that weren't supposed to have them. She even wanted to wear high-heeled shoes with ankle socks. And so Banton turned Clara Bow over to Edith to dress. And the most famous picture they did together was Wings, in which Clara Bow wore a uniform through most of the film. In the middle 30s, when Travis Banton was still on hand to do the really big stars, Edith was assigned the starlets and the actresses who were coming up. And the head office told her that these young ladies were to have absolutely nothing to say about the costumes they wore. But nonetheless, Edith managed to talk to them. She managed to get a sense of what they thought looked good on them, what they liked. And she would put those same kind of ideas into the drawings, so that the studio would think they were hers from start to finish. And when these ladies became big stars, they remembered her. And of course, they were very loyal and always wanted her for all their pictures.
Edith Head knew how to talk with the stars. She knew how to make them feel very important, how to give her attention only to them. They always felt that they were number one with her.
Edith was very, very bright about publicity. She was very bright about promoting herself. But she was smart about what worked in a film and what didn't. She really knew. You can spot an Edith Head film a mile away. I mean, there is a style there that's definitely hers.
Edith was a very good people person. She worked very well with anybody. Generally on a picture, you have a lot of people who have conflicting ideas. You have the star who wants to look good no matter what. You have the director who wants the clothes to work for the dramatic situation and not be too attention-grabbing. You've got the producer who doesn't want to spend too much money. the art director, the cameraman, all these people have their input. And Edith was very good about learning about all aspects of filmmaking so that she could discuss these things with everybody.
She knew what was safe, and she sometimes would play it safe rather than get herself into a bad position. Sometimes taking chances is great, but it doesn't work for every director. You have to the director has to ask for something special, and she would give it to them. But if she didn't, she played it pretty safe.
She wasn't shy, she was powerful, she was strong. She was demanding. She was tough.
In 1948, at the insistence of Edith and other Hollywood designers, an Academy Award for Best Costume Design was finally established.
2 Oscars would be given, one for black and white and one for color. And Edith was nominated for the picture The Emperor Waltz, but she didn't win, and she was very disappointed. But the next year, she was nominated again for Best Black and White for the movie The Heiress, and she did win.
The Oscar for The Heiress would be the first of 8 Academy Awards Edith Head would win in her 60-year career.
Oh, darling, let's never leave this place. Let's just stay here alone.
Don't let Father upset you. I'm the one who counts.
In 1949 was when Edith began work on A Place in the Sun. It was directed by George Stevens, and Elizabeth Taylor was borrowed from MGM to play the leading role, so that was the beginning of her long friendship with Elizabeth Taylor. And of course, Stevens wanted her to look immaculate as a very high society, kind of spoiled, rich girl. The Place in the Sun tulle evening gown was copied many, many times by 7th Avenue designers and department stores all across the country.
I'm just fooling around. Maybe you'd like to play.
Oh, no. I'll just watch you. Go ahead.
Edith later worked with Elizabeth Taylor on a picture called Elephant Walk, and throughout the years did a number of projects with her. She always tried to emphasize Taylor's beautiful shoulders, her bust, and her small waist. Edith's favorite director, and the one she worked with many times, was Alfred Hitchcock. Edith worked with Hitchcock and Grace Kelly in To Catch a Thief, which became her all-time favorite film. The first time Cary Grant sees Grace Kelly in the movie, she's wearing a very startling black and white outfit. And the colors progress slowly. At one point they go for a picnic and she's wearing kind of a coral pink skirt. And Grace Kelly said to Edith that she didn't want to wear pants for that scene. She wanted to be very feminine. So Edith made her a sporty outfit with a skirt and a blouse. And there were 2 beautiful evening gowns. One was draped white chiffon, the other was draped blue chiffon. These sort of played up the cool aspect of Kelly's demeanor. But the very end of the film, she's wearing a fabulous gold lame evening gown. And so, of course, you know this has to be the climax of the picture because nothing can top that dress.
So this is where you live. Oh, Mother will love it up here.
Roman Holiday presented a challenge to Edith for a number of reasons. The studio had not been able to cast the leading role of the princess. And so finally she was told that Audrey Hepburn was going to play the part, and she was given Audrey Hepburn's measurements, and she was shown the test films that Paramount made of Hepburn. And based upon those things, she made up a number of different versions of each change. She gave her various scarves to put around her neck so that she would cover up her prominent collarbone. She was doing this to sort of hide what she perceived as Audrey Hepburn's faults, which Edith was very good at camouflage.
Can I have a silk nightgown with rosebuds on it?
I'm afraid you'll have to rough it tonight. In these.
Pajamas.
Sorry, honey, but I haven't worn a nightgown in years.
One of the hundreds of films featuring Edith's designs was the perennial holiday classic, White Christmas. The film star, Rosemary Clooney, recalls the black velvet gown that Edith created for her.
Everybody talks about the great dress and the diamond pin on my butt. There was a pin that Edith had said, we've got to have something that just kind of breaks up that black velvet, and so that was what she did. She had a rare sense of humor. Edith didn't like to dress women. She loved dressing men. Loved Danny Kaye's. For instance, the best things happen while you dance. That scene where he was dressed in gray. He had a gray blue suit on, but The socks were exactly the same color, and the shoes were exactly the same color. So the extension, dancing, it was never broken because of a change of color. It was just they worked together beautifully.
Edith found it to be a formidable task in designing the clothes for Gloria Swanson in Billy Wilder's Sunset Boulevard.
Sunset Boulevard represented an interesting challenge for Edith Head. She and Billy Wilder and Gloria Swanson got together and came up with a particular concept for the clothes. They did not want to have Swanson wearing 1920s styles. She was living in a 1920s type house that had never been remodeled since Norma Desmond's glory days. But the basic lines of the clothes were the new look that Dior introduced in 1947. And how they brought Norma Desmond into this was just to exaggerate more. And one of the problems in doing this was that the new look accentuated waistlines a lot. And the ideal at that time was to have a very tight waist and a very full skirt. And Gloria Swanson, although she was still quite thin, her waist was not as trim as it had once been. And she did not choose to wear a waist cincher.
There just aren't any faces like that anymore. Maybe one, Garbo. Those idiot producers. Those imbeciles. Haven't they got any eyes? Have they forgotten what a star looks like? I'll show them. I'll be up there again, so help me.
Edith's dress around the studio was always very conservative, as opposed to some of the other lady designers who would arrive wearing fabulously glamorous clothes.
Edith was brilliant about packaging herself, and realized early on that she was not a glamour girl, and so she sort of had that well-dressed schoolmarm look, and no matter when you see pictures of Edith, she's maintained it. You always know exactly who the picture is.
She generally wore black and white or beige and brown. Once in a great